Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My name is Hannah Ortiz, and when people ask me now when it really started, I do not say it began with the first emergency alert or the first videos of people losing control in parking lots. I say it started when the bees went quiet. I lived on 5 rented acres east of Fresno, out past the newer subdivisions and the warehouse strips, where the roads got narrower and the houses sat farther apart behind wire gates and dry ditches. It was not a big operation. I was not some 4th-generation commercial beekeeper with flatbeds, forklifts, and thousands of colonies moving up and down California with the almond bloom. I was an amateur with 12 Langstroth hives, a pickup truck with more miles than I like to admit, a part-time job managing inventory for an irrigation supply company, and a habit of writing everything down. The bees started as a hobby and turned into the truest thing in my life. I liked the order of them. I liked that a strong hive had a sound to it before you even cracked the lid. A deep, working hum that told you the colony was alive, organized, and busy. I liked the smell of warm wax, propolis, and nectar. I liked the math of it too. Frame counts, brood patterns, feed rates, mite checks, queen age, weather, bloom timing. Bees rewarded attention. If you stayed observant, they told you what they needed. That winter had been mild by valley standards. The nights got cold enough to matter, but not hard enough to shut everything down for long. By late February, the almonds had already pushed a pale band of bloom across huge parts of the Central Valley, and everyone around us was talking about pollination contracts, irrigation schedules, diesel prices, and whether the year would be another bad one for water. Normal California worries. That was the world right before things slid. I noticed the first dead insects in the first week of March. At the time, it did not feel dramatic. I was doing an entrance check just after sunrise, coffee in one hand, notebook tucked under my arm, smoker still cold because I was not planning a full inspection. The air had that early spring chill that lifts fast once the sun clears the orchards. Usually the entrances were busy by then. Workers would be cleaning house, dragging out dead winter bees, orienting young foragers, landing heavy with pollen. Yellow, orange, pale cream. The whole front of the hive should have looked like an airport at shift change. Instead, Hive 3 had a thin scatter of bees on the landing board and a half circle of dead ones below the stand. That alone was not unheard of. Colonies lose bees every day. But these were wrong. They were not just spent workers carried out by house bees. A few lay on their backs with legs curled tight. A few were face down in the dust. 2 or 3 were still moving in tiny irregular spasms like the muscles had not gotten the message yet. It reminded me of pesticide exposure videos I had seen during one of the extension classes, except I was not near any field that should have been sprayed overnight. I crouched there longer than I meant to. More bees emerged, stumbled onto the landing board and dropped. No circling, no lift, no orientation. Just a short, frantic crawl and then down. I wrote, March 4th, 7:08 a.m., Hive 3. Entrance mortality above normal, twitching. Suspect chemical exposure. Check neighboring properties. That same morning I found the same thing, though lighter, at Hive 6 and Hive 9. The others looked mostly normal. I called in late to work and did full inspections on all 12 colonies. Brood patterns were decent. Queens present in 10. 2 were queen-light and needed attention, but nothing catastrophic. Varroa counts from my last alcohol wash had been acceptable. Feed stores were fair. No obvious dysentery. No sign of robbing, no torn cappings. No smell that suggested something had soured inside the boxes. It made no sense. Healthy-looking colonies were acting poisoned at the entrances. I called my neighbor first. Dale Meriwether farmed almonds on a chunk of land bordering the canal road. He was in his 60s, raw-boned, sun-baked, and suspicious of most things younger than himself, which included me. But he was fair, and he knew I kept bees. "Did you spray anything near the east fence last night?" I asked. "No." "Anything drift in from the south block?" "No spraying. Wind was wrong anyway. I'm finding bees dropping at the hive entrances." He was quiet for a second. Could be somebody else. Could be one of those mosquito treatments. There were no county notices. "That means less than it should," he said. "You want me to ask around?" "Yes." He said he would and hung up. At noon, I called the county agricultural commissioner's office. The woman who answered took the report politely, transferred me twice, and finally connected me to an inspector who asked good questions in a tired voice. Number of colonies, timing, visible symptoms, nearby crops, recent treatments, water sources. He said they could log the complaint, but unless I had a confirmed chemical event or mass kill, response might take time. There were a lot of reports that time of year. He told me to collect samples, freeze them if possible, and document everything. So I did. That became my pattern for the next 2 weeks. Wake before sunrise. Check the hives. Photograph entrances with timestamps. Collect dead bees with nitrile gloves and clean tweezers into labeled sample bags. Write weather, wind direction, temperature, activity levels. Work my shift at the irrigation warehouse pretending everything was ordinary while my head ran numbers. Stop at feed stores. Ask other hobby keepers quiet questions. Listen more than I talked. Come home. Transfer notes to a spreadsheet. Pin locations on a printed county map I kept above the kitchen table. The spread was not random. That was the first thing that scared me. I started hearing similar stories from small keepers east and southeast of Fresno. Not thousands of dead colonies all at once. Not the kind of obvious agricultural disaster that makes the evening news. It was quieter than that. One man in Sanger lost activity in 3 hives almost overnight. A retired teacher near Selma found piles of bees under 2 colonies, then saw the remaining workers moving in erratic circles before vanishing. A woman outside Reedley said her bees had become disoriented and mean for 48 hours, then simply stopped flying. Someone near Kerman told me he found dead wild pollinators around a bird bath, not just honeybees, but bumblebees, wasps, and some moths. I was not part of some official network, but beekeepers talk. We always have. Through farm supply counters, Facebook groups, swap meets, extension talks, and those weird friendships that form when 2 people can argue seriously about queen cages and syrup ratios for 20 minutes. I started hearing the same phrases repeated by people who did not know each other. Quiet entrances, twisting movement, sudden collapse. Not weather, not mites, not starvation. The second thing that scared me was that it was not only the bees. The first birds came later. I found 3 starlings under the pepper tree near the pump shed. They had not been chewed by anything and did not look like they had hit a line or window. Just dead, wings partly open, as if they had folded themselves down wrong. Then I found a mourning dove in the dry grass by the water trough. Then 2 scrub jays on the shoulder of the road 1/2 mile from my place. I told myself it was exposure, poisoning, coincidence. California is full of ways for small animals to die, but once your brain starts sorting patterns, it does not like to stop. I called my younger brother, Mateo, who worked maintenance at Community Regional Medical Center in downtown Fresno. We were not the kind of siblings who talked every day, but we kept close enough tabs to know when the other was lying. "You sound wound up," he said after I explained the bee die-off. "Because I am." "You think it's contamination?" "I do not know what I think. I think something is moving through the environment. Through bees. Maybe, or maybe the bees are just the earliest sign because there are so many of them and I am paying attention. He let that sit for a second. You want me to ask around about unusual tox screens or exposure cases? If you can do it without getting yourself in trouble. I work maintenance, Hannah, not a hospital administration. You hear things. That part is true. A few days later, he called me back during my lunch break. We've had a run of people coming in with high fever, confusion, agitation, and sometimes weird tremors, he said. Doctors were throwing around heat stress, drug reaction, viral encephalitis, meningitis, bad synthetic stuff, all the usual guesses when nobody knows yet. How many? Enough that people noticed. Any occupational link? Agriculture? Chemical exposure? Not cleanly. One was a truck driver. One was a school custodian. One was an elderly woman from Clovis. One was a guy brought in by deputies from a gas station on 99. Any bites? Animal exposure? Not that I heard. Are they testing for anything? They're testing for everything. Doesn't mean they're getting answers. Do they have families with symptoms? I do not know. That was the week I stopped sleeping well. It is easy, after everything, to pretend I knew where it was heading. I did not. I did not hear fever and aggression and immediately think the dead are coming back or society is about to crack in half. Real life does not work like that. It gives you bad data, partial data, and ordinary explanations that keep fitting right up until they do not. My first theory was still environmental poisoning. Maybe a bad batch of illegal pesticide. Maybe runoff contamination. Maybe a fungal or viral spillover event affecting insects and people differently. I spent late nights reading papers I only half understood, trying to connect neurotoxicity in pollinators to mammalian symptoms, looking at county water reports, wind maps, crop spray notices, avian mortality bulletins, even wildfire residue studies from prior years. I began carrying a respirator in the truck, not because I was sure it was airborne, but because I was no longer sure it was not. Then the first video made the rounds. It was shot outside an urgent care in Visalia. A woman in hospital socks staggered through the sliding doors and pushed a security guard so hard he hit the concrete planter behind him. 2 people tried to help her. She turned on them with a kind of frantic, total physical commitment that looked less like anger than panic stripped of reason. The person filming kept backing away, swearing, and the clip cut off before anyone could tell what happened next. You can explain away almost anything once. Drugs, mental break, one isolated event. Then there was another clip. Fresno this time, outside a pharmacy, then one near Bakersfield. Then a highway shoulder scene filmed from inside a locked car. People said all the usual things online: fake, staged, bath salts, rabies, government test, migrant disease, heat madness, demonic possession. Every frightened person on earth grabbing the explanation that best matched the furniture already in their head. I kept looking at the timing on my map. Bee die-offs first, then birds, then unexplained fevers, then public incidents. I showed the map to Mateo when he came over on a Sunday afternoon. He stood in my kitchen, still in work boots, staring at the pins and circles I had drawn around clusters in red marker. "You've gone full detective board," he said. "I know how it looks. It looks organized, which honestly is more unsettling." I pointed at the clusters. "These reports came in over 16 days. Look how they stair-step along the corridor. Fresno, Sanger, Reedley, Selma, back west, then south. Not perfectly, but enough. You think bees are carrying it? I do not know. Maybe they are vulnerable to the same thing before mammals are. Maybe they're being exposed at water or flowers before people are. Maybe they're just the canary." You know you just said the most worrying sentence possible in the calmest voice. I need you to tell me exactly what you're seeing downtown." He hesitated. More restraints, more staff injuries, more security presence. 2 floors restricted last night. Administration sent out a memo about visitor control and rumor management. Rumor management? That's the phrase they used. That is a terrible phrase. I know. He looked past me through the window toward the hives. You really think it's connected? I think dismissing it because it sounds strange would be stupid. What are you doing if it gets worse? I've been asking myself that. At that point, I was prepared, but in the wrong direction, exactly like I would later tell the story. I had samples, masks, gloves, disinfectants, water test kits, field guides, printed county maps, a battery-powered microscope I barely knew how to use. I had food, but mostly because I always kept more than average. Rice, beans, canned tomatoes, oats, coffee, shelf-stable milk, dog food for my healer, Mix Blue. I had fuel cans because rural people keep fuel cans. I had backup power for the chest freezer and enough lumber in the shed to fix fences or board a window. But mentally, I was still set up to investigate a problem, not survive a collapse. That changed the day I went into Fresno for lab supplies. I had ordered sample vials and extra nitrile gloves from a scientific supply shop that handled local agricultural clients. It was near an industrial strip south of downtown. I took the truck in after work, planning to grab the order and stop by Mateo's hospital to bring him dinner. The sky was the flat white blue you get in the valley when the light feels dusty even without visible haze. Traffic was heavy but normal until it was not. It happened at an intersection 2 miles from the supply shop. I was stopped at a red light behind a landscaping trailer. On the sidewalk to my right, a man in office clothes sat, slumped against a bus bench. I noticed him because a woman was standing a few feet away talking into her phone, looking frustrated, maybe asking someone what to do. Then the man lurched forward so fast I thought he was falling. He hit her low around the waist. She screamed. Not a startled scream, a full animal panic sound that cut through closed windows. The phone skidded across the sidewalk. He clamped onto her with both arms and would not let go, even when she kicked and another man ran in to pull him off. For a second, everybody froze the way people do when something happens outside normal categories. Then the honking started. Someone in the lane beside me tried to drive up over the curb. The landscaping truck in front of me jumped the red light. The woman got free, stumbled back, and the man on the ground came after her again on hands and feet first, more like a person in a seizure than a person in a fight. The light turned green. Nobody moved correctly. Cars angled around each other. I did not go toward the supply shop or the hospital. I turned left, then right, then 2 more turns without thinking, trying to get out of the knot forming behind me. My phone was vibrating in the cup holder. Mateo calling. I answered on speaker. "Do not come here," he said immediately. "I'm already in town." "Turn around." What happened? Emergency department intake is overwhelmed. Security locked one entrance. There's fighting in the parking structure. Fighting? Hannah, listen to me. Patients are getting combative fast. Some people crash and then spike back up worse. Nobody knows what protocol is. Cops are bringing in more than we can safely process. Are you safe? For the moment. Come to my place. I can't leave yet. You can if the building becomes a trap. He did not answer right away, and that answer was enough. I drove home by surface streets, avoiding Highway 99 because the traffic reports were starting to mention stalled vehicles and closures. I passed 2 minor collisions, one ambulance boxed in by cars trying to turn around, and a grocery store parking lot so jammed it looked like Black Friday footage. Outside Clovis Avenue, a man was pounding on the glass of a locked urgent care door while someone inside held it shut with both hands. That was the moment I stopped telling myself this might blow over by morning. When I got home, I changed the entire shape of my thinking. First, I called Matteo until he picked up. "You're leaving tonight," I told him. "I'm on shift." "I do not care." "You should probably care a little." I watched something happen at an intersection that was not normal. I passed 2 medical facilities already in trouble. "You told me not to come to the hospital. That means you know it's worse than the memo said." He went silent. "Matteo, I can get out in maybe 3 hours. No, sooner. I'm trying. Take back roads, come armed with tools, not heroics. Bring water, batteries, first aid, and your work badge in case it still opens controlled doors somewhere." "You've been rehearsing that?" "For 2 weeks, apparently." He laughed once, without humor. "All right, I'll try." Next, I made a list and wrote it on the whiteboard I used for feed ratios and hive notes. Water, fuel, doors, windows, perimeter, power, medical, communications, sleep, mobility. I filled every container in the house and outbuildings: bathtub, sinks, 5-gallon water jugs, stock tank, washed buckets. I topped off the truck and siphoned from the small tractor tank into approved cans. I brought tools inside that I did not want stolen or left out if I had to move fast later. I cut plywood sheets for the back windows, not because I expected a siege that night, but because I knew hardware stores would be chaos by dawn if people were still able to shop at all. I moved a spare freezer against the mudroom door as an internal barricade. I tested the generator and set extension cords in place. I laid out boots, long sleeves, leather gloves, eye protection, headlamp, flashlight, spare batteries, and my respirator by the bedroom door. Blue followed me room to room all evening, reading my mood. Dogs know when the shape of the house changes. At 9:30, cell service started to degrade. Not completely, just enough to make every call feel fragile. Messages went through out of order. Videos stalled. Local pages filled with rumor and repetition. Schools closed for public health assessment. Several clinics suspended walk-ins. A county statement urged calm and told people to seek care for fever and altered mental status. The governor's office announced emergency coordination. Every official message sounded like it was trying to stay one full step behind reality. Matteo arrived at 1:12 in the morning with dried blood on one sleeve that he swore was not his. He parked with the headlights off and came through the gate fast, carrying a duffel bag and a plastic crate. I opened the door before he knocked. "You're hurt?" "Not mine," he said, then saw my face. "I swear." He looked exhausted, gray around the mouth, older than 30. Blue shoved against his legs, whining. Matteo knelt and held him for a second longer than usual. We sat at the kitchen table while he drank water and gave me the cleaner version of what had happened. Patients arriving feverish and disoriented. Some becoming violent after periods of apparent weakness. Staff using the restraint protocols constantly. Families panicking. False rumors spreading through waiting rooms. Security collapsing under volume. At some point, police began diverting people, but not fast enough. There were injuries from falls, fights, bites, and car crashes all mixing together. Nobody had a single name for what they were seeing, which made every response worse. "Do the doctors think it's infectious?" I asked. "They think it could be. Contact, fluid, aerosol, vector, they were throwing out possibilities. But nobody had enough confirmed data to say. All they knew was people were going from fever to aggression and not responding predictably. Any link to agriculture, insects, toxins? I asked one of the residents. She looked like she wanted to cry and told me the whole differential list was on fire. That was fair. We slept in shifts, or tried to. At dawn, I checked the hives again. 6 more colonies were quiet. Not dead, not empty, but wrong. Weak entrance activity, bees emerging, drifting sideways, dropping into the dust. Hive 3, now almost silent. I stood in my bee suit with the morning sun coming up over the canal berm and felt something close to grief, which at the time seemed ridiculous compared with what was happening in the cities. But those hives had been the first clear warning I had understood, and I had not understood enough. Matteo came out carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Bad? Very. He watched the entrances with me. I see it now. Yeah. Does looking at them help? It tells me time is moving. By late morning, there were emergency messages advising residents to stay home, avoid contact with symptomatic individuals, and limit travel unless necessary. That was the polished version. The practical version was obvious from the road noise. Too many sirens. Too much hard acceleration. Too many engines where people were either running toward family or away from crowds. Our place sat far enough off the main road that we could choose not to be seen if we kept still, and that became our first real advantage. I made a switch from normal thinking to layered thinking. Not just what we needed in the next day, but what would matter if infrastructure bent or broke for a week, a month, longer. What fails first? Grocery distribution, fuel reliability, minor medical access, cell bandwidth, routine policing. Then what? Water treatment interruptions, power instability, fires unattended, desperate movement outward from denser zones. We divided the property into zones like I was drawing a site plan at work. House, shed, pump area, hives, west fence, gate, fallback interior. We checked every latch and hinge. We dragged old farm equipment near the inside of the gate to make a quick vehicle barrier. We covered the spare windows from inside so the house would not glow after dark. I shut off unnecessary breakers to reduce load and preserve fuel. We filled every prescription we still had on hand from old refills and made an inventory of bandages, disinfectants, over-the-counter meds, electrolyte packets, masks, gloves, and soap. The first strangers came that evening. Not infected. Just scared people driving country roads because the highways were becoming stories nobody wanted to test. A minivan rolled slowly past our gate, then reversed. A woman leaned out and asked if we knew whether the road connected through to Sanger. I lied and said there was a washout ahead. She thanked me and drove on. Half an hour later, 2 young men in a sedan stopped and asked for gas. I said I had none to spare. That was true in the only way that mattered. They stared at the cans stacked near the shed, and I stepped far enough forward that they understood the answer was finished. They left. That night, we heard gunshots from too many directions and at irregular intervals, far enough away not to be immediate, close enough to tell us the valley was changing shape. On the 3rd day, the power flickered 6 times before noon and then went out for good. We ran the generator in short windows only. Chest freezer first, fridge second, battery charging third. I had enough stored fuel for careful use, but not for comfort. Without the hum of appliances, the house sounded different. Bigger, thinner, less protected from the open land around it. The hives were mostly dead by then. 2 still had some visible movement. I could not make myself open them for full post-collapse inspection. It felt too much like an autopsy when I had live problems in front of me. The county radio traffic on the scanner got harder to follow as more agencies piled on and units stopped answering cleanly. Fire response delays, welfare checks stacking. Deputies stretched thin, medical calls with no transport available. Then long, empty stretches that were worse than the noise. Matteo rigged an antenna improvement from spare wire, and that bought us a little more reach. We wrote down every fragment that sounded useful. Roadblocks, facility closures. A shelter site opened, then overrun by volume, then status unknown. Fuel thefts. A warehouse fire near an industrial district. Reports of people wandering into traffic. Reports of coordinated attacks. Reports of uncoordinated panic that looked like attacks if you only saw 10 seconds. By the 5th day, we had our first direct contact with infected people on the property. 2 of them came along the canal path from the south just after sunrise. I saw them through binoculars from the upstairs window where I had started doing scheduled scans every hour. A man and a woman, both moving with that same broken urgency I had seen in town. Fast in bursts, then stalling, then redirecting sharply at sound or motion. They were not shambling movie corpses. That would have been easier in a way because it would have been less human. These were sick living people pushed past reason. Their clothes were filthy, their balance poor, but their speed came back in dangerous flashes. I called Matteo quietly and we watched from inside. The pair reached the outer fence, snagged briefly on wire, and became more agitated. The man started ramming the posts with his shoulder. The woman clawed at the mesh and made a high, breathless sound that carried farther than I liked. We did not go outside. We did not speak above a whisper. After several minutes, they lost interest and drifted north along the fence line until brush hit them. That was when our real rules began. No unnecessary noise outside. No travel after dark. No opening the gate unless departure is already decided. No letting strangers inside the house. No assuming one person means one person. No direct contact with symptomatic individuals under any circumstances. No wasting fuel on fear. It sounds harsh now, but rules are mercy when panic wants to improvise. The hardest part came a week later when my friend Leah showed up. Leah Kim taught high school biology in Fresno and had been one of the only non-beekeeping people willing to listen seriously when I talked about the die-offs. She arrived near sunset in her compact SUV with one headlight out, her face gray with fatigue, her father in the passenger seat, and a boy in the back I did not know. She stopped short of the gate and honked twice in the pattern we had agreed on over text days earlier, back when text still mostly worked. Matteo looked at me from the porch. "You trust her?" "Yes." "Her passengers?" "No idea." We approached cautiously, masks on, gloves on, staying separated by the gate. Leah got out slowly with both hands visible, which told me her day had taught her things too. "My dad's diabetic," she said before I could speak. "We've got supplies for a few days. This is my neighbor's son. His mom didn't make it out. We need water and somewhere safe for one night. That's all I'm asking." This is the part people judge from comfort, from hindsight, from clean rooms. I wanted to open the gate. Leah was not a stranger. I knew her laugh, her handwriting, how she labeled microscope slides when she helped me once with pollen identification just for fun. But I also knew one vehicle could become 4. One act of mercy could erase every practical advantage the property gave us. We had no way to quarantine them properly. No way to verify exposure. No medical support if any of them turned sick during the night. I looked at Matteo and saw that he knew the cost of both choices too well to help me with it. So I made the compromise I could live with. I told them we could not let them inside the fenced house area, but they could use the old equipment lean-to on the west side of the property for the night. Separate structure. Water containers left outside. Sealed food, sanitary supplies, fuel not included, no entry past the marked line. Leave at first light. Leah closed her eyes for a second, then nodded. She understood exactly what I was doing, and that somehow hurt more than if she had yelled at me. We moved quickly, no contact, no handshakes. We set down what they needed and backed away. Leah's father looked embarrassed in the fragile, formal way older people do when receiving help under bad circumstances. The boy never spoke. That night, I did not sleep at all. At 2 a.m, I heard an engine far down the road, then 2 more. Vehicles stopping and starting. A door slam. Someone shouting. Then silence. At 4, Blue gave a low growl from the mudroom. I checked the yard through a darkened window and saw flashlight beams moving near the western fence. Not Leah. Not by the height or the pattern. I woke Mateo. We stayed inside and listened. The voices were low, then sharper. Men arguing. One of them said he knew there was a house here. Another said they should keep moving. Something metallic banged against the outer gate. Blue's hackles rose. I thought about the fuel, the generator, the water, the fact that once a rural property is known to hold resources, it rarely becomes less known. We waited, without breathing, until the beams moved away. At dawn, Leah's SUV was gone. In its place by the lean-to was a note weighted with a spark plug socket. "Thank you. I know the choice you made. You were right to make it. Check your western fence." We found where someone had cut at the wire in the night but failed to get through before deciding it was too exposed. After that, we reinforced everything with what lumber and scrap we had left, and the property became not just a home, but a position. Weeks passed in a rhythm that would have sounded impossible to my old life and quickly became normal. Morning scans, water checks, quiet meals, short generator runs, radio monitoring, limited perimeter work only in pairs. We learned which sounds brought infected drifting from farther off and which ones did not carry. Engines were bad. Metal impacts were bad. Dog barking was bad, so Blue had to be kept inside more than he liked. Human voices at conversational level could carry surprisingly far in the still evening air. We learned that the infected were inconsistent in endurance, but reliable in attraction to sudden movement and noise. We learned that the living could be more dangerous than the sick because they still planned. My notebooks changed too. They stopped being mostly about bee samples and turned into a field log of collapse. Date, weather, water level in storage, fuel remaining, radio fragments, human movement on the road, infected sightings, smoke columns on horizon. I kept the old bee map on the wall because I could not let go of the idea that the beginning mattered. On quiet afternoons when the heat pushed everything flat and still, I would stand in front of it and trace the spread with my finger. I was still trying to understand. 3 weeks in, we finally opened the dead hives. There was no practical reason to do it then. It was not safe to spend emotional energy on bees when the world was burning more literally in places west of us. But I needed to know what I could know. We suited up fully, worked in the coolest morning light, and moved methodically. Hive 3 first. The colony had collapsed almost in place. Not normal dwindling. Not gradual abandonment. Frames of capped brood that had failed mid-cycle. Workers dead on the bottom board and clustered near the entrance as though flight had become impossible faster than internal colony behavior could adapt. Stores still present. Queen present, dead. Little evidence of robbing by stronger colonies, probably because stronger colonies were failing too. A few surviving scavengers, ants mainly, but otherwise a sealed little ruin. Every opened box told the same story with small variations. Sudden dysfunction, rapid depopulation. No clear starvation timeline. It supported what I'd seen, but it did not explain it. I collected more samples anyway, absurdly careful, labeling dates in a world where mail no longer ran and laboratories might no longer function. Mateo did not mock me. He understood by then that the act of documenting was part of how I stayed useful. In late April, nearly 7 weeks after my first note, we made our first deliberate trip into town. We had avoided it as long as possible, but insulin was becoming the kind of issue that ends all other discussions. Leah's father had been in my mind since she left, and now Mateo pointed out that if we were counting supplies honestly, we needed to know what remained in abandoned clinics or pharmacies before desperation made such trips impossible. He was right. We could not live on caution alone. So we planned it like a work operation. Route selection on paper first, avoiding major arterials. Objectives limited to 3. One independent pharmacy Matteo knew might still have backup refrigeration if power had been restored intermittently. One veterinary supply store for sterile syringes and antiseptic. One hardware lot for fencing materials if reachable. No heroics. No downtown penetration. No entering crowded structures. No lingering. If the first stop looked wrong, abort. Driving into Fresno after weeks away felt like entering a stage set after the audience had fled. Not empty, worse than empty, intermittent. Streets with nobody on them, followed by sudden movement at the next block. Cars left at bad angles. Storefront glass broken selectively, not universally, which told its own story about where panic had gone first. Burn marks up the side of one strip mall. Shopping carts and medians. A city still physically recognizable and socially erased. Near a school on the east side, we passed a line of hand-painted signs wired to a chain-link fence. Water at gym, no entry after dark, masks needed, bring own containers. The gym itself looked abandoned or resting. It was hard to tell. At the pharmacy, the front had been forced but not completely cleared out. Matteo and I stayed together, masks on, speaking quietly. The smell inside was heat, dust, spoiled packaging, and something metallic from a shelf display toppled near the register. We found the refrigerator room and back. Backup power long dead. Some medications ruined by temperature. Some still potentially viable, depending on what they were and how long the cooling had held before failure. Matteo sorted with the focus I had seen in him only during real crises. He built order anywhere he could. We were almost out when a voice called from behind the greeting card aisle. "Please do not run." A man stepped out slowly with his hands visible. Middle-aged, thin, wearing a city utility jacket and carrying a pipe wrench not quite like a weapon and not quite not. Behind him was a teenage girl with a backpack and a face so tired it looked older than her father's. "We're not here to take from you," I said. "I live 3 blocks over," he said. "We watch this place in shifts." That could have been a lie. It could also have been true. "We need medication," Matteo said. "That's all." The man's eyes flicked to the cooler bag in Matteo's hand. "For diabetes?" Matteo paused. "Yes." The man nodded once. "Take what you came for. Leave the antibiotics." That sentence told me more about the city than any radio report. Local rules, priorities, communities improvised out of need. Not everyone had become a raider or a victim. Some people had become exactly as hard and practical as the world required. "We can trade batteries," I said. He considered, then nodded again. We made the trade in the parking lot at 10 feet apart. He told us there was a neighborhood water point still functioning near a church farther west. Guarded, but orderly. He told us to avoid the old shelter site near the fairgrounds because it had fractured into factions 2 weeks earlier. He told us the infected still moved through in waves, especially near noise or old feeding points, though nobody used that last term consistently. Before leaving, he looked at the bee veil stuffed under my arm from our field kit and said, "You a beekeeper?" I was. He gestured vaguely toward the empty sky over the parking lot landscaping. "We noticed." That sentence stayed with me the whole drive home. We noticed. Not just me, not just the hobby keepers. The city people too, even if they did not know what they were seeing at first. Fewer pollinators around flowering trees. Quieter medians. Empty air where there should have been movement. The absence had registered before the cause did. Nature had thrown up a flare, and most of us had not known how to read it. Summer came early and hard. The valley browned out at the edges the way it always does, but now there were fewer pumps running, fewer maintained fields, fewer crews, fewer schedules holding the place together. Fires started, and sometimes kept going until they hit roads or bare ground. Refugees moved through the rural roads in smaller numbers than I had feared, and in sadder condition than I could have imagined. Some traveled with discipline and purpose. Families, pairs, work crews that had stayed intact. Others moved like sleepwalkers, running on momentum and fear. We helped when we could at distance. Water, directions, sometimes food left at the gate in sealed bags. But we did not open the perimeter, and I stopped apologizing for that in my own head. Months later, when the acute phase had burned into something uglier and slower, I could finally say out loud what the early weeks had taught me. Preparedness is not one thing. It is not a bunker fantasy or a shopping list or a weapon you hope solves your fear. It is pattern recognition. It is humility. It is being willing to let old explanations die when the facts stop fitting them. I had prepared to understand. Then I had to prepare to endure. Those are related skills, but they are not the same. I still kept the notebooks. By autumn, I had turned one bedroom into a records room. Maps on the wall. Field logs stacked in milk crates. Sample bags I could not bring myself to throw away even when their scientific value was probably gone. Radio transcripts. Dates of local sightings. Water notes. Crop condition observations. Bird counts, which were awful. And pages on the hives. I wrote not because I thought some future agency would sweep in and ask for my amateur chronology, though maybe part of me hoped that once. I wrote because memory gets distorted under pressure, and I wanted one straight thread running back to the beginning. The day I realized we might survive the first year was not dramatic. No major victory. No rescue helicopter. No restored government convoy rolling down the road. It was a November morning with low fog pooled in the irrigation ditch and a cold that made the metal gate sting your hand. Blue was older in the muzzle already. Mateo was checking the inverter setup we had cobbled together from salvaged panels and battery banks. I was standing near the old hive yard with a mug of coffee, looking at the empty boxes I had not had the heart to dismantle. Then I saw one bee. Just one at first, working the late flowers on a patch of volunteer mustard that had come up near the fence after the first rains. Small, purposeful, ordinary. Not from my dead colonies, obviously. Maybe feral. Maybe from some survivor hive miles away in a wall cavity or abandoned barn or irrigation structure. Then another. Then a third, crossing the pale strip of light near the ditch. I cried harder at that than I had at the gunshots or the blackout or the day Leah drove away. Not because I thought it meant the world was fixed. It was not. But because it meant the world was still arguing with its own ending. I went back inside and made the note as carefully as I had made the first one. November 18th, 8:14 a.m. Observed live foragers on mustard near south fence. Small number. Flight stable, no visible distress. Then I added a second line. The warning came early. We did not listen because it was small. That is the truest thing I can say now. The collapse did not begin when cities burned or hospitals failed, or emergency alerts told everyone to stay home. It began when tiny bodies accumulated at hive entrances, and I still believed the disaster would come with a label big enough for everyone to read at once. It did not. It came in fractions, in quiet signs, in systems slipping one by one, while most people waited for an announcement strong enough to relieve them of having to decide for themselves. I do not know, even now, whether the bees died from the same agent that tore through people, or whether they were simply more sensitive to a link to environmental change. I never got the kind of laboratory proof that would let me say it cleanly. Maybe nobody did. Maybe somewhere there is a locked freezer and a dead hard drive full of samples and reports that would connect the whole chain from insect collapse to human outbreak. Or maybe the full answer burned with the institutions built to find such answers. I kept bees outside Fresno, California. I was watching when the first warning happened, though I did not understand it in time. By the time everyone else saw the outbreak for what it was, I had already learned the most important and most useless lesson of my life, which was that evidence is not the same thing as belief. You can hold the proof in your hand and still be too early for anyone to hear you. So, I kept writing, I kept mapping, I kept the dates straight. I learned when to stay silent and when to move. I learned that surviving the end of one world often looks less like courage than routine. Check water, check fences, check radio, watch the horizon, sleep in turns. Save what can still be saved. Mourn what cannot. Repeat. And every now and then when the air is warm enough and the weeds are in bloom, I still stop and listen for that old sound. Not because I expect the past back, just because I remember what it meant when it disappeared. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.